Welcome everyone, Costini here with a discussion about Ultimate General American Revolution and to talk about some of the issues that this particular title has. Some of the biggest problems that this title has, though not necessarily the biggest problem, I would argue, that currently exists in the game. Now, right now, the game is in effectively a beta for an early access, so there's a lot of things to be changed. I think the core of the gameplay is good. The framework that the game is built around is fairly solid. There's a lot of things to be enjoyed. The issues are more on the nature of balancing as opposed to anything else. So they can be fixed, and this game is probably not going to be out for 8+ months. So lots of things to be changed in that respect, lots of things to be improved. And the reason I'm making this video is to highlight some of the things that I believe do need to be improved. So, a couple of issues that we're talking about over here. This game has this dynamic system of battle. So when two armies meet on the battlefield, if you're with the general in a nearby area, you can initiate a manual battle. That's all well and fine, all well and good. The problem is, the issue that I do want to highlight is with regards to the auto-resolve, the settlements that exist in this game. So basically, in Warhammer 3, you have minor settlements, so regular settlements, and then you have forts. And the auto-resolve and the impact that the auto-resolve has on your campaign. Because there is something pretty broken with respect to that. So, when two armies meet on the field of battle, like this, they're gonna start skirmishing. There's even a stat that a unit does have when you're talking, like there's stats that affect their ability to do so in either melee or in skirmishing situations on the campaign map. And by the way, I'm just going to pause it here because I do want to, I don't want things to continue developing here. But when units meet, so you have these stats, you have close combat, you have skirmishing. So when you engage a unit in close combat, you would engage basically in a melee fight. It's kind of a brilliant system, though it does have its issues. So it can be unwieldy to command like an army this size. It does help when you take multiple units and form a brigade. So like if I select these 3 units here, I can form a brigade, which can be made up of 4 units. And you can command the entire brigade as a unit. There's a bit of an issue with that, because whenever you enter a settlement with units, because you need to enter in a settlement with units to replenish them, and replenishment, by the way, doesn't happen automatically. You need resources for that. So you're going to need recruits in a settlement, you're going to need supply in a settlement, you're going to need to have guns, you're going to need to have officers. So every regiment is going to need guns, it's going to need officers, both regimental commanders and low-ranking officers. Like you can see the officer report over here. So this, by the way, represents the low rank officer, so I have 10 of those. I actually don't have any high ranking officers available right here. If you do have a shortage, you can use the global project. So supply, so officer shortages are one of the main things that can hamper your progress in a campaign. It does get pretty annoying in a campaign. Though, to be clear, in this particular campaign, it's effectively one. All I need to do is march on Quebec. There's not really anything that's going to stop me. Oh, I'm afraid of 1,000 Canadians that are going to put up a serious fight against me, the British loyalists. I have 2,500 men. I will sweep them aside with Benedict Arnold over here. That's not a concern. The issue is how the dynamic works with auto-resolve and with units meeting on the campaign map. And to that, I'm going to look over here to Benedict Arnold. So over here, there's a unit, a company. It's a single company because you have regiments. That's the basic unit. This is a militia regiment. It's got 3 companies in it. Each company has its own leader, its own low-ranking officer. It has its guns, all that. So when, it is a company. I'm outnumbering them, 4-1 over here easily. So you might think that I can just go close in the melee and win. Well, if I try and do so, I will lose. That is one of the problems that does exist here and that does get created. So you see this unit is already routing before these guys even have intervened. That is one of the problems that does exist here. because you get this kind of situation created where even when you outnumber the enemy by 4-1 in a settlement, let alone in a fort, you can still lose. That I feel is ridiculous. Yes, the British have some proper units, all that, though they're not different than these guys basically. So I'm dealing with like Canadian loyalists. They're not, I wish to emphasize, they're not maybe, I think they're on potentially the same level as the British regulars, but still 4-1 advantage. That is a fight, like I would sweep them aside in a manual battle. But out-resolve, being what it is, engaging in melee is a disaster over there. I can skirmish from range, and surprisingly I'll actually win, but a full-on melee charge, which by the way you can certainly do in a regular battle, would not work over there. That is one of the problems. And even if it does work, you then end up with another problem. Yes, which is actually the more serious of the two. Having a situation where you have to fight a lot of these manual crappy battles on your own, and by the way, battles will not just trigger because, oh, you have a general in an area next to a unit. First off, you do need to have a general next to a unit, which means your generals are going to be running around like maniacs trying to fight all these manual battles. But you can't just like, oh, I'll just skirmish and, that will be the out-resolve. No. Let me highlight why that doesn't work beyond the casualties, because there's a more serious problem. So I have here this entire army. Let's say we engage in a fight, we start fighting. I imagine I'm going to get, hopefully I do get some units routing. Now let's see what this routing unit starts doing, like what these guys start doing. Do they run back into Middleborough? No, they're going to start running north. This is where the problems really kick in with out-resolve and with the campaign map. That unit that you just saw, that entire regiment, there's still enough units, there's still enough men in that regiment to cause a lot of issues. So them running away, especially if them running away to the north, unless I chase after them, they'll take Boston, Salem, Portsmouth. Like basically they can take everything from here all the way to here. And that is frustrating. You only have one general. There might be many of these situations. And you might also have battles in certain section of the certain section of the campaign map where you don't have a general where this kind of out-resolve dynamic is taking place. So it is very easy for a unit that is defeated, I wish to emphasize, not a full strength unit, not some raiders behind you, like a unit literally defeated, that is going to obliterate your back ranks, your supply, your economy, your production, simply because they got away. And by the way, chasing units on the campaign map is a bloody pain in the neck to achieve. So what do? You fight battles manually. Let's do that. Let me just go over this. Alright, so we are here at Fort St. John's, and we are going to attack. Now, if I launch a frontal attack, it might fail, though really, it probably will succeed. So, here's the siege tactics in this game. Now, to be fair, the fort does confer an advantage to the defender, but realistically, since I outnumbered them, like, honestly, a 2-1 advantage in a situation like this is more than enough to sweep them aside. If I was trying to out-resolve this, I would lose. I may not. Thankfully, this is not like an out-resolve like in Total War, where you lose like your entire army. So that's a good thing from my perspective. The problem is you do start encountering those issues that I do mention. By the way, like, gunpowder units are not particularly strong. Like, guns are not particularly strong in this game. Melee is. Actually, I fear the artillery in melee, because, like, the reason I fear the artillery in melee is because melee is heavily dependent on you doing a charge, so it's about momentum. That's pretty realistic until it doesn't work. The reason it might not work in certain situations is because when they drop the guns, some units might stop their melee charge, units might break down. Like, that's the problem, I think, why artillery is such a nuisance. But yeah, the battle is won. Easy job. I'm gonna try and capture them. Okay. So, 390 to 399. Alright. And I got the game crash. Regardless, you might spot the difference. So, this unit lost here. These guys in the fort got obliterated. And I didn't have a 5-1 or 4-1 advantage quite here. And even if I had one here, like, there might have been more that survived here. at Burlington than they had survived at St. John's. That's where the annoyance gets into over here. Now, sure, you can benefit for this. By the way, there's just some jank, like with controlling units on the campaign map. Battles, it's a bit better, though certainly there's a level of jank. So, for instance, you can, let me just ignore that. So, for instance, you may form brigades on the campaign like this. By the way, my entire army, well, Washington is just fleeing because that's what happens. You may form brigades on the campaign map, but if you send units in a settlement to replenish, those brigades will be broken. You will have to reform them. It's a lot of hassle. Also, you can't just, like, right-clicking a settlement will do nothing. Like, maybe they enter it. Let's see if they do. Like, you start seeing some of these issues. Okay, in that case. But it just feels, like, very clunky with that. Typically, you'll have to click, like, let's say you have a unit inside the settlement and you're saying, oh, okay, just go outside. Yeah. The unit you just had selected gets deselected. There's jank there, and you have a lot of micro annoying stuff to do. But regarding the state of affairs with auto-resolve, it's not a great dynamic to be dealing with. Because, like, look at these guys, right? As I said, like, Portsmouth, Salem, Stevens, Lovell, from units that were defeated, are going to want to do it. Now, it's not too big of a problem with major battles, but it becomes really annoying really quickly when you have, like, a lot of these minor battles. Like, a single unit, more or less, can walk all over my territory over here if I'm not careful. So it leads to some genuine tedium to deal with on the campaign map, and a situation where you're fighting battles that you know you're going to just steamroll. You're wasting time in a loading screen for a crappy battle that is not in any way conducive. I don't care what the gameplay mechanics. Like, if there's no challenge, nothing at stake or all that, that's not interesting. And I think, by the way, the battle mechanics of this game are actually quite interesting, because there's many tactics and strategies to use to minimize casualties. But just as equally, unlike, say, Total War, you just because you show up with a powerful army does not mean you automatically win. Like, battles are not predetermined, but, like, in these kind of smaller engagements, it's annoying. It's also annoying, like, you have no kind of garrison. Like, I'm not fond of garrisons, but when you limit how many armies you have, right, and you're also limiting how many regiments you have because of the officer shortage, when you have those kind of limitations in a campaign, yeah, I think, like, each settlement having at least one garrison unit, like one company of 100 men, 50 men, it doesn't matter, it could be literally 50, 60 men, just to stop a unit that's literally been defeated. Though in this case, it would not stop it, but fine, that's a major battle, I'll accept that. I will not, however, find it acceptable to have, like, a unit of 50, 60 men running around and being a nuisance. Like, even these 80 men that walked away there, like, they could be a nuisance. Though in this case, it's better because we're not by the coast, so they'll likely retreat in their territory. Another thing to point out, by the way, here is, like, if you let these units walk away, they will replenish their numbers. Like, they won't rebuild any shattered units, but they will, like, reinforce their already existing companies that survive. That's over there. Like, basically, they're just down to one, maybe two companies, if they're very, very fortunate, as opposed to the full regiment, more or less, that I had to deal with that was there before. So they're going to be weaker. This situation is better, but you end up with what feels like a ping pong with settlements in this situation. And kind of frustrating, and a pretty frustrating campaign experience that forces you to fight a lot of battles manually. You take more casualties, the enemy takes less. If you're any kind of decent player, the enemies take less, and they could cause a lot of issues. So that's not a great situation. And this, by the way, translates into the naval battles. Like, the naval battles are not exactly fun to play over here, because they're kind of like, out-resolving any naval battle is a disaster. Like, your ships, like, obviously in this case they will lose, but especially because there's a ship of the line here, But auto-resolving any kind of naval battle is an utter disaster because your ships will take damage and it will take quite a long time to recover from that damage. So you're pushed into a situation, fight a bunch of constant battles, many of which are not interesting, many of which are not challenging, many of which offer no exciting gameplay experience, but you're doing it, right? Especially with a ship situation, that's kind of annoying. And also, by the way, it's kind of annoying because, like, your major ships, like these ships, took quite a bit of damage, but they were not necessarily facing like this, right? They were not facing a fleet like this. No, they were facing far, like the auto-resolve with ships is like ridiculous. Like the way your ships take damage is pretty damn ridiculous. And meanwhile, the British have a Dyson sphere. What also is more annoying in this entire dynamic is what makes it worse is the British naval invasion. So basically, let's say you take Boston, you've wiped the British out, you've taken Ticonderoga, you're marching on Canada, or rather, you've taken Ticonderoga. Until the map opens in Canada, it does get better, much better once the map opens up like this. But once, like you wipe out the British and all that, the British will start launching naval invasions about once every month. So every month you're going to have a major battle against like 4,000 British troops. Now, that gets tedious really, like after the second or third battle, because once you realize what you're dealing with, because you know they're not going to stop. It's not exactly, like the battles themselves, obviously on that kind of larger scale, can be interesting, but it's also really irritating to just like kill so many British troops, and then it's like, oh, we're just gonna pull more of them from out of our ass. I've killed more British troops in this campaign so far than were lost by the British in the entire Civil War. No, twice over. Like I've killed over 20,000 British in this campaign. That is ridiculous. So these systems, auto-resolve, settlement capture, etc., naval invasions, combined with the balancing situation, difficult time that it takes to repair ships, all that, does not lend itself to a great campaign experience from my point of view with respect to that. I do wish to emphasize these issues are balance issues. Like if, let's say a unit routes an enemy territory, yours or the enemy. Well, if there's not a direct line, like let's say if you're in a province next to one of your own, okay, fair enough, right? They'll retreat to that province. But in this case, these units should just be surrendering, right? But, well, they've already taken Portsmouth, so point made. Now, I can obviously avoid this. I can avoid a lot of this situation by fighting a lot of these crappy battles manually. Now, to be fair, the battle here would have been far better. But yeah, there's just problems with that balancing, problems with how these things kind of work. I'm not saying auto-resolve should be like better than a manual outcome, especially like when you know the British may have better troops, better guns, etc. That's fine. I'm fine playing a battle like that. But when I literally outnumber them 4-1, historically speaking, a lot of the battles of the Civil War were far more even than people might realize. Yes, there were the odd exceptions where one side outnumbered the other heavily, especially when the British were heavily outnumbered, then they still won. But more often than not, they could also lose. Like Camden is not, like, and even Camden, like I'm willing to accept a 2-1 requirement to win like against a settlement. Maybe 3-1 with a fort. Fair enough, right? A 3-1 numbers advantage to be able to win auto-resolve. Anything more than that is utter nonsense. So like me having to assault this fort manually, okay, fair enough, I'll take it. And also having to chase down those units. By the way, there's no good way of chasing down those units, because like the only thing I have here is like, yeah, I have some dragoons that rush to get in this campaign as quickly as possible, but yeah, just not a great campaign dynamic, and I think that's one of the things they should look to change. It's more of a balancing issue. Like, I feel settlements should have just some inherent defensive force, because historically, they did. They did. Not a significant force. Not the force that can stop an entire regiment. Like, no settlement should stop an entire regiment, but just a company. So if a unit is running away, right, you see so that depleted units that are running around the campaign map controlled by the AI don't just take over half your territory, because you can't defend it. Like, leaving your units to defend, you're going to lose the campaign if you do that. Like, that's the thing. You are facing, like, over here, I need these units to take over Canada. Like, I can't spare the men over here to garrison these settlements. And if I am going to have to spare these men, I'm going to spare the men to garrison the settlements I'm just going to take in Canada because they might rebel against me. I'm not going to waste my time trying to hold bloody Alabama in New York or Fort Montgomery just because some random ass unit controlled by the British decided to show up there for no reason. Now, if the British were to launch a major naval invasion, and naval invasions did occur, right? The British did arrive via the sea. That's fine, but the frequency of that is pretty annoying. There's a lot more to unpack. I'll talk about more of the issues I have, why I think this game does well, what I think it does poorly in a review, but this is one of the fundamental problems I consider with the game right now. It can be fixed, unlike, say, Total War, which would require overhaul, I think, to really fix there. But even in Total War, it's more of a balance issue than anything else, like without resolve and all that. I think it would be easier for the developers here to fix it, but what do I know? Kostin signing out.